The Greenskins are already known for their focus on melee power, with heavy armour and even heavier damage, but what if they took things one step further? Introducing the Iron Orcs, which are like the Orcs, but with a lot more iron. They're extremely tough, deal some crazy damage, and actually have a pretty compelling campaign. So let's take a look and see how it all works. And if you want to take a look at these videos without ads, it's by becoming a channel member. All the same videos and none of the ads, all for $1 a month. Become a member at the link below, and now onto the Orcs. The Iron Orcs share most of the same mechanics as the regular Greenskins. That means they're able to call wars to summon armies of uncontrollable size, use scrap to upgrade their units, and in general focus much more on fighting everything in sight than any real form of diplomacy, outside of dominating other Greenskin tribes of course. However, alongside all of this, they also bring a few mechanics of their own. Feats of Iron are a pretty straightforward mechanic since it's basically the big names from the Ogre Kingdoms. You have to complete various objectives such as winning battles of certain size, reaching certain levels, and more. Once completed, you'll unlock each feat along with the bonuses that come with them. And, just like the reworked Ogres, once a feat is unlocked, the effects are permanent, so no swapping is needed. That said, I'm kind of assuming, since I could not get these feats to complete no matter what, so let's hope I'm right. I should be. Who would possibly make the big names mechanic and then make it the worst way? Anyway, the Iron Orcs' approach to settlements is also rather unique. Capital settlements work more or less as normal, though with a more limited selection of buildings. Some of the roster isn't available to them, allowing the military buildings to be condensed, their garrisons are built into the settlement building, and they only have a handful of economy buildings. Minor settlements have more or less the same selection, however, they can only ever have a single building slot. You can choose to occupy these settlements to gain use of commandments and use their single building slots for minor recruitments or economy, or you can leave them raised. Doing this increases the income of the capital settlement by increasing amounts based on the capital size. This ranges from 20% at tier 1 to 100% at tier 5, so you could potentially double your income if you reach max size. This is far more than those settlements would make by themselves, making this an excellent way to boost your economy with minimal investment. That said, this buff doesn't stack, so you only need one settlement to be raised to get the bonus, meaning if you want to, you can occupy everywhere else. However, they're not all that worth the investment, so feel free to leave them empty and instead pour those resources into your capitals and armies. And to ward off any invaders from colonizing your ruins, once the capital settlement reaches tier 4, all ruins will be unable to be colonized, effectively placing all control in a region to the capital. Lastly, they can also make use of rights. These work pretty much the same as they do for any faction with rights, only now with a Greenskin theme and cost. They're a little harder to unlock than most rights, which is fitting given how challenging the Feats of Iron are to unlock. However, the effects are really quite powerful, so are worth both the weight and the large gold cost. You can massively buff lords and heroes with tons of XP and ward save, empower your most powerful monsters whilst making them essentially free to recruit, give offensive armies a major power boost, and lastly, massively increase your income from battling and raiding. The last one is the only one with no gold cost, but it does have the longest cooldown, so should be used when you're doing lots of battling to really maximize your income. Currently, there's only one faction in the mod, and they're called the Iron Orcs. They're led by Drogmark the Looter. Mechanics aside, the faction has a very strong focus on constant battle. Not only will this bring in plenty of rewards in the form of income and growth, it will also allow your armies to keep moving to chain together victories with ease. Their focus on attack means they suffer penalties to leadership when defending, so ensure you're on the offensive in as many battles as you can. Diplomacy was never going to be an option, but just to hammer it home, they suffer from massive diplomatic penalties with Bretonnia and cannot diplomatically confederate any other Greenskins, making any relationship relatively pointless. Drogmark's army gains more income from raiding, making it nice for some added cash when moving through foreign lands. And of course, he has his unique wire during battles, increasing splash damage. They start their campaign in Karak Izor and basically nobody nearby likes them. They start at war with Karak Norn, who aren't too tough to take down, but you'll quickly need to deal with Belagar, an aggressive Scrag, and potentially Elspeth, and more. It can be pretty tough, but like any Greenskin, once you get your first war going, it really helps you get on a roll, especially if you can get a full stack to maximize the extra units. Their climate preferences make expansion limited to the mountains and the Badlands, so suitable lands are a little hard to find. However, rather than being limiting, it instead allows you to sack and raise your way to riches, so it works out pretty well. No matter where you settle, you want to take capital settlements and raise everything else around them to buff your income and minimize your investment costs. Keep using those rights to give yourself an edge and don't worry too much about going into the red. This is a faction that thrives on battle, so regular income can be a little bit harder to come by, especially at the start. Now we come to the roster. First up we have the Lords, and we of course have the legendary Lord Drogmark the Looter. Surprisingly, he's not more armoured than Grimgor, but nevertheless is one tanky boy with high armour and strong defence. His damage is all in the melee with excellent attack, massive armor-piercing weapon strength, and dazed imbued attacks to reduce enemy defense. He's a melee powerhouse and will only get stronger the longer he battles, thanks to his Primal Mind passive, boosting his weapon damage the longer he's battling. With abilities, he can further boost his and allies' damage alongside his own toughness to keep him healthy, even in the most dire of situations. Just throw him into melee against anything, and he will probably come out on top. We also have a new generic lord, the Iron Orc Warboss. Compared to the regular Orc Warboss, they obviously have more armor alongside improved defense. They also sport increased weapon strength, but do lose a little armor piercing, so may struggle against tougher targets. They're still straightforward frontlines lords with decent melee power, but will hardly carry your battles for you. They also have the selection of a couple of mounts. The Iron Orc Warboar grants them more speed, charge bonus and health, making them into decent charging lords. Have them moving around with your cav for some cycle charging, otherwise that larger hitbox can be a bit of a problem. And they also have access to the Iron Biter. This brings improvements to almost every stat whilst maintaining the same medium form factor. They're now even better at the same jobs, only now with a nice hit of armor piercing damage. Cycle charging is still the way to get max value, but sustained melee is now much more viable with the added damage. Next up, melee infantry, and first we have the Iron Orc Boys. Basically all of these units are upgraded versions of existing Greenskin units, so get ready for a lot of comparisons. Coming from regular Orc Boys, they gain a nice hit of armor, alongside stat improvements to almost everything else, and a small reduction in leadership. They're tanky line holders that can take a serious beating to go down. However, their low leadership does mean they usually break before they can really make the most of it, so giving them plenty of support is essential for continued success. Their own damage is okay, but lacking much armor piercing, so against tougher threats, they'll really need support to do anything. They have the Iron Orc Boy Biggins. God, I forgot how much I hate saying the Greenskin roster. More or less the same changes as before, but they also gain a not insignificant chunk of armor-piercing damage. They're now a fantastic damage-dealing infantry, able to take down much larger threats with ease. Their defense is a little lacking, so if they're up against armor-piercing, they'll go down in no time, especially with their lack of shields. Combined with their moderate leadership, you really want to pick their targets and make sure it's something they can beat quickly to stay in the fight. You also have the Great Weapons Iron Orc Boy Biggins. If it was possible, these are even more damage focused than the last unit. They drop some defense to gain attack and a massive chunk more weapon strength. If you for some reason want even more damage and a unit that's a true glass cannon, then these are the unit for you. Not much else to say other than please give them as much help as you can to protect them from ranged and high damage, otherwise they will fold like laundry. The Iron Orc Brutes are coming from the Black Orcs and actually drop some armor and leadership, but gain speed and weapon strength. They're not damage powerhouses by any means, but they'll certainly hit back a little harder in sustained melee. They'll of course need help against late game heavily armored threats, but make for a strong and relatively long lasting front line with some okay damage. And lastly, the Great Weapons Iron Orc Brutes. These drop a significant amount of defense along with their shields to gain attack and truly stupid weapon strength. With just over half of that being armor piercing, they will cut through most threats in moments, but of course, the same can be done to them. Focus on high armor, low damage threats if possible, otherwise give them plenty of support to take down units as quickly as you can before their defense becomes a problem. Avoid ranged as much as you can and keep an eye on their leadership to avoid a break in your line. There's also a new unit of ranged infantry, the Crossbows Iron Orc Boys. From the Iron Orc Boys, they drop a little bit of every melee stat, making them pretty weak both for attack and defense. As far as ranged power is concerned, they're not too bad with medium range and decent damage, even if it's not majorly armor piercing. With their curved firing arcs, they can sit and fire pretty safely from the back, making them a decent early way to get some free damage. However, their limited ammo does mean they run out of uselessness fast, as they're next to useless in melee. A good addition for the early game, but something that wants to be phased out as the game goes on. They also have a new cav unit, the Iron Orc Boar Boy Biggins. From the regular Boar Boy Biggins, they actually drop some armor and defense to gain a nice boost to attack, charge, and damage. The armor piercing split is much better, meaning they can turn even the toughest units into a fine paste with a couple of well-placed charges. Use them to cycle charge the backs of the front lines to flatten the most heavily armored units you can find and make the most of that devastating charge. They can easily take down back lines and artillery, so wipe them out first before coming back for anything tanky. And lastly, the monsters and beasts. First up, the Iron Squigs. Coming from regular Squigs, it's improvements across the board, making them much tougher and more deadly with a nice boost to charge bonus. The armor piercing is about the same, but if you use them to cycle charge, it adds up quick, especially for how early you can get them. Target back lines to wipe them out in moments, then the backs of the front lines to really push the armor piercing to its limit. Just keep an eye out for them going on a rampage, as they're still pretty susceptible and will likely die if they do it in the wrong spot. The Colossal Iron Squig drops some speed and attack from the regular Colossal Squig, but gains armor, weapon strength, and charge. Most of the additional weapon strength is armor piercing, making it pretty damn deadly against front lines, no matter how tanky. Throw it into your front lines to take out whatever it finds, and make sure it doesn't get targeted from a range. Then simply dust off your hands and congratulate yourself on a battle hard won. Mork's Maw is pretty similarly shaped to the Kadai Destroyer, and their stat card isn't too far off either. It drops some armor, leadership, and weapon strength, but gains increases to everything else. This makes them into powerful frontlines monsters with very high attack and damage, but not the most survivability. You want to focus on the highest armor, lowest damage targets you can to maximize their damage and minimize their risk. The longer they battle, the more they improve theirs and nearby allies' damage output, so keeping them alive and battling is essential for getting the most out of them. Take down any ranged threats that could take advantage of their large size, and other than that, just keep an eye on their leadership and ensure they don't rampage and get themselves killed. And lastly, the Gork Stomper. This is like an armored toad dragon from Nurgle. It gains increased armor alongside attack and a nice boost to weapon strength. Their massive armor piercing damage makes them devastating in melee no matter what they are battling. Combined with their massive splash attacks, they can bowl through enemies in seconds, leaving nothing but a fine red mist in their wake. They're kinda tough, but still avoid any massive damage, especially in the form of ranged focus, as they just can't handle it. You can temporarily make them a little tankier at the cost of some speed, but try not to rely on this too much. Get them in, watch them tear things to pieces, and just hope there's something they can kill if they go on a rampage. Now to wrap up with a mod review. The Iron Orcs are a faction that I thought would be extremely simple, and to a degree, they are. They take the constant battling of the Greenskins and streamline it even further by placing all the importance in capital settlements, meaning you can really focus on them rather than having this massive empire. It feels kind of like playing the Warriors of Chaos, but instead of demons, you're controlling a bunch of lads and boys. I really like their approach to the settlements, as I love when a faction deviates from the usual occupy everything. It made choosing where to settle feel a little more impactful, as they really felt like strongholds to mark your territory rather than just another settlement to expand it. The addition of rights and big names are really cool and strong when they are working, and I'm sure they will be online in no time. As for the roster, I like feeling a little bit more limited in what to pick. In Warhammer 3, most factions have rosters that are honestly a little bit too big. You have too many choices, meaning you can make an army that's good at everything, making the game a little bit dull. Their limited choices are entirely focused on heavy armor and huge melee damage, giving them a very fun and immersive playstyle. They are a slow moving wall of death that shreds anything that gets close and have to use positioning and monsters to win, rather than the traditional range spam. The Greenskins normally have some aspect of this, but with the Iron Orcs you really feel the limits and it makes battling a lot of fun. The choice to have units be low leadership makes sense in the early game, as otherwise units with high armor and leadership would be pretty broken, the dwarves. However, in the late game it did feel a little unnecessary, as most other factions have units of equal or greater armor while still being confident. It's not a deal breaker, but with their defense actually dropping off in the later game, it does make them feel like a bit of a glass cannon that needs to win the battle quickly, rather than a tough tanky wall that breaks down enemies bit by bit. Still, overall, I like the new units both from a visual and performance perspective, and that combined with the refreshing campaign makes this mod an easy recommend. If you feel like you're a little overplaying the Greenskins, then I really think you should give them a go. They spice things up while still maintaining that fun, chaotic DNA that they've always been known and loved for. Their limited roster encourages more strategic thinking in battles, and their limited infrastructure really allows you to lean into the roaming warband playstyle. But what I want to know is, what do you think of the Iron Orcs? Are they a fun new way to enjoy the Greenskins, or just a slow, scared imitation of the Great Green Wave? Let me know in the comments below. Like, subscribe, and if you want more Warhammer 3 mod videos, then check out this one all about the roster of the Hung.